Hey everyone, let's be honest. After investing hundreds of hours exploring Faerun, testing crazy tactics, and dealing with the consequences of our choices in Baldur's Gate 3, it's hard to look at other RPGs the same way. I've done a lot of research to pick out 10 new games and promising early access titles that capture exactly that same magic. So grab your favorite drink, prepare your virtual dice, and join me to discover what your next big adventure will be. Let's head straight to the games. At the Game Awards 2025, the studio responsible for Baldur's Gate 3 announced its next project, simply called Divinity, the 7th game in the franchise that gave birth to the Belgian studio before BG3 even existed. Right off the bat, Sven Vincke, the founder of Larian, declared that this is the most ambitious project the studio has ever stood up, larger even than Baldur's Gate 3, with about 500 employees working on it as of January 2026. The announcement trailer was a very clear statement of intent regarding the game's tone, and it's not for kids. The scene begins by showing a tortured prisoner suspended by the wrists in a complete state of degradation before transitioning to something that looks like a lively party with people eating, drinking, and dancing, until you realize they are burning the prisoner alive as part of the celebration. This says a lot. Divinity is going to embrace the darker and more brutal side of the Rivellon universe, the same one where elves chew on severed arms to absorb memories and dragons lead armies. Those who know the Divinity Original Sin universe already know what this world is capable of, and those who came for BG3 will discover that Larian has roots even more visceral than they imagined. The important point to understand is that this is not Divinity, Original Sin 3, it is a new chapter in the broader Divinity franchise, which includes titles ranging from Divine Divinity in 2002 to Dragon Commander in 2013, all taking place in the world of Rivellon. Larian is clearly breaking free from the Dungeons & Dragons system they used in BG3 to create their own rule set from scratch, which means the elemental surface interaction system, a hallmark of Divinity, Original Sin, could return with full force and much more refinement. In other words, fire, water, poison, and electricity interacting on the battlefield in a way BG3 could never do because it had to respect D&D rules. What has already been confirmed is enough to get any RPG fan's heart racing. It will be turn-based, the same backbone as BG3 and the Divinity Original Sin games, with single-player and co-op multiplayer options, and it will be released first in early access, as Larian always does. The studio is still developing a new version of its proprietary engine to handle the scale they are planning, which shows they aren't just making a BG3 with a different skin, they are building something that technically goes beyond everything they've done before. And the simple announcement of the game was already enough to skyrocket sales of BG3 and Divinity, Original Sin 2, to levels that Larian itself called incredible. If BG3 was the peak of the genre for you, know that Larian is using exactly what they learned there to climb an even taller mountain. And when Divinity arrives, it will likely redefine expectations once again. If you are a fan of Baldur's Gate 3 for the weight of the choices, for companions that feel real, and for a narrative that doesn't treat you like an idiot, then let me introduce you to Exodus, a game that carries one of the most ambitious promises of recent years in the RPG world. Developed by Archetype Entertainment, a studio founded by BioWare veterans, including James Olin, Chad Robertson, and Drew Karpyshyn, the same ones who built Mass Effect and Knights of the Old Republic, and published by Wizards of the Coast, Exodus is the kind of game that appears once a generation. And the cast's biggest trump card, Matthew McConaughey in a central role as CC, or Lev, your mentor within the story, with a presence that promises to elevate every scene to the max. The story takes place 40,000 years in the future, in the Omega Centauri star cluster. You are June Aslan, a simple scavenger who becomes a traveler, the elite who pilot ships at the edge of the speed of light to find relics called remnants, advanced technology left by the Celestials, a race that was once human but evolved into something completely different and threatening. The central problem is brutal. When you travel at relativistic speeds, time passes much faster for those who stayed at home. Days for you are decades for your companions, your family, and the entire civilization you are trying to save. It's the concept of time dilation, the same thing that made Interstellar so emotionally devastating. But here, you control those decisions, and every mission you accept carries the weight of knowing that the world you find upon returning will never be the same. Mechanically, Exodus is a third-person action-adventure RPG with intense cover combat mixed with special abilities coming from a technological glove capable of fusing remnants, creating unique powers that evolve as you progress. But where the game really sings is in the RPG layer on top of that. Companions with deep personalities, dialogues with real moral weight, and factions whose alliances and rivalries change depending on your choices, which goes straight to the heart of those who love the political and emotional complexity of BG3. The team consists of the exact people who invented this type of storytelling in games, so it's not empty hype. It's a proven legacy. The element that makes me most want to play Exodus is the idea of generational legacy that the time dilation system creates. Every time you return from a mission, years or decades have passed for those left behind, and the world has been shaped by your previous choices in a way that goes beyond a simple mission consequence. Characters age and die during your absences. Civilizations rise and fall. The story you are building spans entire generations within the game's narrative, and you will feel the emotional weight of that in a way that very few RPGs have ever managed to provoke. This is the kind of design that makes you stop and think before clicking accept mission, and it is exactly the depth that BG3 fans look for in every new game. If you're the type who spent hundreds of hours in Baldur's Gate 3 building the perfect party, planning every combat move like a game of chess, and still daydreaming about the next adventure, I need you to pay attention now because Terrinoth, Heroes of Descent might be exactly what you've been waiting for. This game is a digital adaptation of the legendary board game Descent: Journeys in the Dark, one of the most respected dungeon crawl franchises in the world, and it's finally arriving on PC via Steam, PS5, and Xbox Series. The setting is as follows. You are in the world of Terrinoth, a dark fantasy universe where dark forces threaten to consume everything, and the only thing standing between the end of the world and civilization is the group of heroes you will assemble yourself. The story is a standalone prequel to Descent: Legends of the Dark, so you don't need to know anything about the previous universe to dive right in, yet longtime fans will find references that will make them smile out of nowhere. The tone is serious, the narrative has weight, and you can truly feel that your party's choices matter within that campaign. Combat is where the game really shines, and it's here that the comparison to Baldur's Gate 3 makes the most sense. It's truly strategic, turn-based combat, where positioning, terrain elevation, line of sight, and timing are factors that can completely change the outcome of a battle. You don't just spam attacks, you need to think about combos between characters, use devastating synergy attacks, and adapt your strategy depending on the enemies in front of you. The learning curve is more accessible than most games in the genre, which is a huge plus because more people can enjoy it without feeling lost right at the start. The full campaign is divided into 4 thematic chapters with multiple missions, and each mission was designed to be completed in a single play session, like a well-invested full night. But what makes everything even more interesting is the online co-op for up to 4 players, where you and your friends coordinate abilities, split roles in the group, and make decisions together during battles. Playing this with a crew is a completely different experience from solo play. The strategic conversations, the arguments over which skill to use first, and that epic moment when the boss finally falls after 3 attempts, you simply can't buy that in any store. And before you go out and buy it, there's a free demo available right now on Steam to test all of this before committing. This demo covers the game's opening, the first dungeon, and already gives a good sense of how combat works in practice. For those who loved BG3, Divinity, Original Sin 2, or any tactical RPG with soul, Terrinoth Heroes of Descent has everything it takes to join your favorites list. Archaelund is a CRPG developed almost entirely by a single person. Yes, a lone developer named David from the studio 4 Dimension Games, and yet it delivers an experience that rivals productions from massive studios. It has been in early access on Steam since January 2024, with the full 1.0 version expected for the third quarter of 2026. And anyone who hasn't heard of it needs to stop everything right now. The story places you in a fantasy world where the powerful Andorian Empire was destroyed by a magical catastrophe that brought horrific creatures into the world, forcing survivors to flee to a distant island called Varanar. Centuries later, with the ancestral lands finally habitable again, the four kingdoms that emerged decide to set their differences aside and send the first recolonization expeditions to Archaelund. And that's where you come in. But stay calm, because this new world is far from safe. The arcane energies left by the catastrophes still corrupt the land, distorted monsters roam the Imperial ruins, and a subterranean race called the Geldrin, who were once enslaved by the old empire, now want to inherit the surface world. What makes Archaelund truly special is the dual perspective the game uses. You explore the open world in first person with that immersive feeling of not knowing what's around the next dungeon corridor corner, exactly like in the great classics like Morrowind and Skyrim. But when combat starts, the camera smoothly shifts to a top-down isometric view, and you begin positioning your group on a turn-based tactical grid that will strongly remind you of how it feels to play Baldur's Gate 3. This transition is smooth, natural, and works in a way that no other game has managed to do quite so well. Character progression is another point that will hook you for hours. Your adventurers start with humble origins. They could be a street urchin, a squire, a hunter, or even a beggar. And throughout the game, they evolve into advanced careers like knight, assassin, or battle mage, carrying unique talents from their previous origins. Most importantly, when you level up, you don't just get bigger numbers, you gain real new tactical options, which keeps every battle challenging and meaningful from start to finish. It's exactly the type of system that makes you think, what build will I try on my next run before even finishing the current one? With very positive reviews on Steam, 84% player approval, and a massive hand-built open world with details in every corner, Archaelund is that hidden gem that grows on you. Every town you discover has people to talk to, unique quests, hidden mysteries, and secrets that reward those with the curiosity to explore. If you loved the depth of Baldur's Gate 3, but missed the atmosphere of classic dungeon crawl RPGs, this game has everything you were looking for without even knowing it, and at a price that won't hurt your wallet. Deep Fringe is a hardcore tactical RPG set in a post-apocalyptic biopunk world, all in pixel art, with a heavy atmosphere of despair and brutality that pairs perfectly with those who enjoy dark stories and difficult decisions. Here, you aren't a world-saving hero. You are a leader trying to prevent your faction from being swallowed by the general misery of this radioactive wasteland filled with mutant flesh and rusted metal. What caught my attention right away in Deep Fringe is how seriously the game treats the tactical concept. Every combat is turn-based with a heavy focus on positioning, line of fire, cover, and using the environment as part of your strategy. It's not just about picking the strongest skill and pressing the button. You need to think about how to advance the squad, where to flank from, what's worth sacrificing, and which enemy to focus on first, very much in line with the mindset you develop playing BG3 on Tactician. And the game isn't afraid to punish mistakes. It's the kind of game where one wrong decision in 3 turns can cost you half an hour of a mission. The big standout of Deep Fringe, and what makes it stick in your mind, is how alive and manipulatable the battlefield is. You can modify or destroy the terrain, collapse parts of the environment onto enemies, blow up cover, open new routes in the middle of the stage, and completely transform how that map works. This changes the classic fixed map logic and turns every fight into a tactical puzzle, where you are redesigning the board while you play, which slightly recalls the systemic freedom we have in the most creative situations of Baldur's Gate 3. only here, on a brutal and cold grid. Another thing I really like is how the game embraces the idea of factions. You aren't just controlling a group of adventurers, but leading powerful groups, each with its own identity, specific skills, and different playstyles. This brings Deep Fringe closer to the vibe of XCOM, Battle Brothers, and The Last Spell, where assembling and managing your squad is almost as important as winning the battle itself. And for those who enjoy creating their own stories, there's even a level editor that allows you to build custom campaigns and scenarios, practically turning the game into a tactical warfare toolbox at the end of the world. To top it off, it's already in early access on Steam with very positive reviews. Over 90% of user reviews are favorable so far, which shows that it's not just a promising idea, but something that is already working very well in practice. The pixel art is grotesque in the right way, the biopunk setting doesn't feel generic, and the sensation is like playing one of those difficult classics, but with modern tactical design concepts. If Baldur's Gate 3 made you like thinking before acting and suffering a little with every decision, Deep Fringe is that natural next step, only now at the end of the world, with much more twisted metal, deformed flesh, and tactical choices that won't forgive you. If you spent hours in Baldur's Gate 3 building the perfect party, carefully choosing each character, and planning every step of the journey as if it were a life or death mission, then you need to check out Pathbreakers: Roaming Blades. It is the next project from Six Eyes Studio, the creators of the cult hit Fell Seal Arbiter's Mark, and is being published by Hooded Horse, one of the best indie strategy game publishers today. This game is a turn-based tactical RPG where you command a mercenary company in a procedurally generated medieval fantasy world, promising a different campaign every time you start from scratch. The game takes the formula of managing a troop in an open world and injects a heavy layer of fantasy on top. You have magic in combat, special abilities like invisibility, and a class system with 8 base options that evolve into advanced careers as your troop gains experience in the field. It's that feeling you know from Final Fantasy Tactics and Fell Seal, where building the right group isn't just about numerical power, but about creating tactical combinations that work together like a well-oiled war machine. The combat itself takes place on hexagonal maps, which already says a lot about the depth the game offers. Positioning, flanking, area control, and the intelligent use of each class's abilities are the difference between a clean victory and the premature end of your mercenary campaign. Beyond open field battles, the game also features real dungeon crawling. You enter dungeons with a small team and limited resources, like oil to keep torches lit, and every step could be your last, depending on your tactical decisions. It's a game that makes you think all the time and punishes those who don't. You'll feel right at home, believe me. But what gives an RPG like BG3 its soul isn't just the combat, it's the feeling that the world around you reacts to your choices, and Pathbreakers understands this perfectly. You can focus on 3 distinct paths: mercenary, trader, or explorer, and each choice defines what types of contracts, alliances, and opportunities appear in your journey. A playthrough where you build a reputation as an explorer will be completely different from one where you become a famous and feared hireling. The procedurally generated world, with cities, dungeons, and hidden secrets, ensures that each new campaign is a different story to tell. The game comes with native mod support, including a map editor, a spell editor, and open file formats for anyone who wants to create content from scratch. The launch is predicted for early access, still in 26, with the full version arriving shortly after. Developed by In Exile Entertainment, the same team behind Wasteland 3, Clockwork Revolution is a first-person action RPG set in a steampunk metropolis called Avalon. It features a AAA budget backed by Xbox Game Studios and is slated for 2026 on PC and Xbox Series, available day one on Game Pass. The story begins with you in the role of Morgan Vanette, a fully customizable character living in the poorest part of Avalon in a gang called the Rotten Row Hooligans. But everything changes when you discover that the villain, Lady Ironwood, has been using time travel to manipulate history, ensuring the elite remain rich and powerful while the rest of the population suffers. You then get your hands on a device called the Chronometer, which allows you to visit Avalon's past, interfere with historical events, and return to the present to see the consequences of your actions, transforming the city in real time. Entire neighborhoods change appearance, characters meet different fates, and the world around you reorganizes based on what you did back then. It's the kind of premise that will keep you awake thinking about everything you could have done differently. Combat mixes first-person action with deep RGB systems, and it's very clear here that In Exile isn't building just another shooter. You have skill trees, weapon crafting, steampunk gadgets, and temporal manipulation powers that can be used in both exploration and battles. Comparisons to BioShock Infinite and Dishonored are inevitable. You'll hear that a lot. But the fundamental difference is that here there is a full dialogue system, genuine decision trees, and real narrative consequences that bring the experience closer to Fallout 4 or what BG3 was in terms of world reactivity. It's an action game with an RPG soul, not the other way around. The great triumph of Clockwork Revolution, however, is how your mistakes and successes in the past literally rewrite the present. It's not a cosmetic mechanic. Entire districts of Avalon can be in ruins or prosperous, depending on the choices you made in previous missions. Characters can be alive or dead, factions can hold power or not, and certain parts of the city might be completely inaccessible depending on the path you chose. This creates a living narrative that begs for multiple playthroughs to see everything exactly like BG3 does, with its different classes and dialogue choices that open completely different paths. With multiple factions to align with, genuine humor in the dialogues, a steampunk aesthetic that looks like it came out of a Victorian dream with gears and steam at every corner, and the narrative weight that In Exile has in spades. Clockwork Revolution is one of Xbox's most anticipated games for 2026, and likely one of the most ambitious RPGs of the year. It's the kind of game that makes you wait anxiously, the one you put on your list and follow every new trailer for hidden details.
Let's go and end a few arguments. Don't get cocky. They've got a weapon far worse. Time. And if they can rewrite history, they can rewrite us. But look who just found Mummy's keys. Now I can fiddle with time. Put the bullet back in the barrel. Bring the chaos to a crawl. Take a mistake and make it like it never happened. We can change the world as we know it. One choice at a time. And I can even go back and change the past to change the future. And let me tell ya, the hunters don't like it when the rabbits got the gun.
Now let me alone and piss off!
You know that feeling of finishing Baldur's Gate 3 and thinking, I want more of an RPG where my choices really matter, where companions have real personality, and where the world reacts to what I do? Well, the Expanse Osiris Reborn might be exactly the answer to that. Only in space, in the 24th century, with intergalactic politics, factional tension, and an alien creature that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew. The game is developed by Owlcat Games, the creators of Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, and Rogue Trader, and it is the biggest gamble in the studio's history. In other words, you already have plenty of history to trust that these people know how to tell a story that hooks you from beginning to end. The game's premise is one of the most immediate I've ever seen in an RPG. You are a Pinkwater security mercenary on a brief break at Arrow Station when everything goes south. A deadly lockdown traps you inside. You are dragged into a conspiracy that spans the entire solar system. And suddenly, you find yourself in command of the most advanced ship in the system, trying to keep the crew alive while everything around you crumbles. The backdrop is the Cold War between Earthers, Martians, and Belters, the three great factions of the series, with a fragile balance of power that your choices can completely shatter. And in the middle of it all, there is the proto-molecule, the alien threat that anyone who watched the series knows is disturbing, and which here is a central part of the narrative. Combat is third person with a focus on cover and abilities, but what sets it apart from a generic shooter is the tactical layer on top. You command two companions in the field while other crew members provide support from afar, hacking systems, distracting enemies, disabling equipment. Most importantly, you can give orders in real time to your allies, creating that sense of squad coordination that will remind you of Mass Effect, but with the narrative depth you know from Owlcat. Each companion has their own personality, history, motivations, and yes, romance possibilities, with each one's loyalty being shaped by your leadership decisions throughout the campaign. The choice and consequence aspect is where the game will make BG3 fans feel truly at home. You can play as an Earther, Martian, or Belter, and this origin affects who you are within the game's political universe. The locations you will explore include Ganymede, Ceres, Mars, and the Moon, with zero-gravity sections that promise to be memorable, all built in semi-open levels with real exploration in the heart of missions. And the consequences of your choices extend beyond a dialogue. They affect factions, relationships with key characters, and the very course of the story in a way that Owlcat has already shown they know how to execute very well in previous games. With a release date scheduled for 2026 on PC, PS5, and Xbox Series, and built in Unreal Engine 5 with cinematic visuals that rival million-dollar productions, The Expanse. Osiris Reborn is probably the most anticipated space RPG of the current generation. The specialized press is already calling it the best hope for a new BioWare, which for those who were passionate about Mass Effect sounds like a huge statement. If you loved the depth of BG3, always dreamed of a space RPG that treats your choices with respect, and still missed the golden age of companion-driven RPGs that make you root for every character, this game might be for you. I know that when I talk about Baldur's Gate 3, the first thing that comes to mind is freedom, doing whatever you want, however you want, and feeling the real weight of every decision. Now imagine carrying that weight in an adventure where you aren't a chosen hero. You don't have divine powers, and you need to eat, sleep, prepare your spells with physical rituals, and study the map before taking any step, because if you don't prepare, the world of Outward 2 will destroy you without the slightest remorse. Developed by Nine Dots Studio, the same Canadian indie studio that created the original, which won over 3 million players, this sequel arrives with a planned release for the summer of 2026, exclusively on PC via Steam, Epic Games Store, and GOG. With consoles yet to be confirmed, what has always separated the Outward series from any other open-world RPG is the total refusal to treat you like a superhero. In Outward 2, you start as an ordinary adventurer, with 3 starting scenarios and 11 different origins that define where you come from and what you start with no grand destiny promised, no messiah engraved in the sky. The world of Ori, with 4 distinct regions of about 2 square kilometers each, changes with the seasons, affecting available resources and the behavior of surrounding wildlife, and with no fast travel and no mini-map telling you where you are. Every exploration is a real adventure where getting lost is part of the experience. It's the kind of game that rewards those with patience and punishes those who treat RPGs like an amusement park. The The combat has been completely overhauled compared to the first game, and if you thought the original was brutal, know that things have gotten even more serious here. Each weapon has its own unique moveset, enemies are now faster and more aggressive, making that old strategy of just running away more difficult, and the addition of a free hand allows for dual wielding or shield use, creating many more build possibilities. But the new feature that excited me most is the ritual magic system. You don't just press a button to cast a fireball, you throw a firestone into the air, creating a ring of flames around yourself, and use that environment you created to power up your skills. It's magic with physical weight and real consequences on the battlefield. Exactly the kind of systemic creativity that BG3 fans love. The permanent save system is where Outward 2 will get your heart beating faster, and not from excitement. The game auto-saves all the time, which means there's no undoing a mistake with a simple reload. Every choice has a permanent consequence. Every defeat teaches you something painful you won't forget. And if you activate hardcore mode, any death has a 20% chance of deleting your save forever. For those who played BG3 on honor mode and felt that adrenaline of not being allowed to fail, Outward 2 is the natural evolution of that. Only in an open world RPG, where even deciding which path to take is a matter of survival. And the most incredible thing of all, you can live this brutal adventure with a friend. Outward 2 features full online co-op and local split screen, with a drop-in and drop-out system that allows someone to enter or leave your session without breaking the campaign's rhythm. The studio has made it clear that the solo experience is the heart of the game. But playing as a duo creates a dynamic of mutual dependence that very few games manage to replicate when your partner falls and you need to survive alone in a dungeon in the middle of a forest without a map. The most honest survival RPG of recent years becomes even more real. Look, there are games you wait for with normal expectation, and there are games you wait for with that childhood anxiety on Christmas Eve. And Fable, the reboot from Playground Games, definitely falls into the second category. Announced since 2020 and finally revealed in detail at the January 2026 Xbox Developer Direct, the game arrives in autumn 2026 for PC, Xbox Series, and PS5, with day one availability on Game Pass. And the reason I bring it here for those who loved BG3 is simple. This is an open world RPG where your choices shape who you are, how the world sees you, and what story you will tell. And that promise has never felt as real as it does now. The story begins with you as a child in a small village, and after a major event, jumps forward in time to your adulthood as the first hero Albion has seen in a generation. The world of Albion is described as a fairy tale with realism. Not a traditional epic fantasy, but an enchanted place with British humor, peculiar magic, absurd creatures, and a constant feeling that something magical could happen around any bend in the road. Iconic locations from the original series, like the capital Bowerstone, divided into wealthy districts and slums, the pirate port of Bloodstone, and the legendary Castle Fairfax, return completely rebuilt with a density of detail that will make you stop just to look. Combat was designed with a fluidity that Playground clearly learned a lot from their years making Forza Horizon. You switch instantly between sword, bow, and magic, without any transition animation stalling the rhythm, creating creative combos that feel natural and responsive. Classic enemies like Hobbs return with a new look. And new monsters, like the fire-breathing cockatrix, add real variety to confrontations. The comparison to The Witcher 3 and Hogwarts Legacy is inevitable and honest, but with that special sauce of British chaos that only Fable can deliver, and which makes even the tensest combat have a joke hidden somewhere. The morality system is where Fable really shows it understands what makes a choice-based RPG unforgettable. And it's here that BG3 fans will feel very much at home. Unlike a simple bar of good versus evil, reputation is now built by witnessed actions. If someone sees you buying up all the houses in a town and evicting the residents, you'll be treated like a wealthy villain. But if you do it far from everyone's eyes, the moral weight stays only with you. With over 1,000 unique NPCs who have daily routines, going to work, visiting pubs, and sleeping, and who judge you according to what you do, the world of Albion feels alive in a way few RPGs have achieved. And the layer of life simulation on top of it all, getting married, having children, buying property, hiring NPCs to run your businesses, transforms Fable into an RPG with a unique personality. And look, Playground Games has never made an RPG before. They are the team behind Forza Horizon, which is basically the gold standard for a well-built open world. Putting that talent and technology at the service of Albion, with the Forza Tech engine completely adapted for world density and narrative, is one of the most interesting bets in the genre in recent years.
Play it day one with Game Pass.